How's it going, everybody? It's Wardy here, and in case you couldn't tell by me smiling cheek to cheek, I'm really excited to get into our latest Big Mets update segment, that being April 15th, 2025, but I'm currently recording this video the night prior, just after the Mets concluded a nice Game 1 victory there in chilly Minneapolis, Minnesota by a final score of 5-1 over those Twins. Check out our post-game coverage from this past night that the thousands of you already have done, and thank you so much for that as we broke down the ball game innings 1 through 9 and all the key takeaways, as we're going to further expand on those takeaways, but headlined by Luisangel Acuna's brilliant play at second base, which now begs the question, everybody, is Acuna going to perform just as good in the outfield for the Mets as a Jose Siri replacement, as Siri's out long-term now with injury? That is what we're going to get into as to what the Mets are expected to do to replace Jose Siri, both internally and potentially externally, and what makes most sense for the club going forward, along with a guy coming back from injury, that being in Ronny Mauricio. We have a key update on Ronny. Finally, something positive to talk about on the Ronny Mauricio front, everybody. I'm excited to get into it. I know that you are too. And Manaea, the Samoan Southpaw, we have some key news as to how his progress has been coming back from that setback of an oblique injury. That paired with the Mets bullpen being nothing short of absolutely electric to begin the season 2.5 weeks in, which has been a huge point to their success, is what we're going to deep dive in this one, everybody. So thank you guys kindly for smashing that like and subscribe button as you first chime in, letting me know all your initial reactions in the comments down below, and shout out to our awesome friends here at BetUS TV that have you covered with all the latest picks, lines, and odds. And as you guys see beside me, look at this for NL MVP for this season. Juan Soto is currently at a line of plus 1,000 on the prop, whereas Pete Alonso is at plus 2,000. Now, if you guys are interested in obviously taking part in this from a bias point of view, it's hard to not at least want to sprinkle a little bit on one of Soto or Alonso, so I'm certainly going to be doing that. I'm sure some of you guys will as well. But shout out to BetUS TV once more that has us covered with these picks and lines, and they're going to have us covered not only for MLB-wide topics, but certainly Met-centric topics throughout the course of the 162. But folks, let me know between Soto and Alonso, who do you think is more likely the best bang for their buck on a play like that for NL MVP? Do you think it's Soto? Do you think it's Alonso? Drop them down below, and thank you so much in advance for that, because let's get into our conversation now, rather, on what were the key takeaways from this latest 5-1 victory for the Mets. And we talked about Juan Soto last night, finally breaking out with a big bopper that we saw to right there to increase the Mets' lead 5-1. We talked about the polar bear getting on base 4 times like the absolute beauty that he is. We went into further on Mark Vientos with now back-to-back games with an RBI double. But there is one player individual performance that continues to trump the rest, in my opinion, and that's because he's stepping up at the most pivotal and important time possible for this Mets team. Folks, Luisangel Acuna is here to stay, baby. We have been beating this drum for the past how many days on the platform now, as Acuna is definitely the right choice between himself and Beatty to get more continued consistent reps at second base. And after both Acuna and Beatty were productive at second and third base in their series finale against the Athletics, that begged the question as to what is Carlos Mendoza going to do for Game 1 against the Minneapolis, Minnesota Twins. And what did we come to find out? Yes, it's Luisangel Acuna's time to shine, baby. He gets a start there at second base, and in a perfect situation, he's batting 9th. And I know some fans are saying, Wardy, what about him batting 9th makes sense? And the simple response is, Acuna is a perfect plate setter. If these highlights aren't evident of that enough, I don't know exactly what is. Acuna is exactly a guy that if he's not going to be batting leadoff, you want him batting 9th is essentially that leadoff role and then some. That's why Jose Siri usually batting towards the bottom of the lineup like that, because of how much of a speed demon that he is. Just like Siri, Luisangel Acuna is one of the fastest players in Major League Baseball and the 98th percentile in sprint speed or so. So he's definitely been carrying his own, carrying his weight on the offensive output, and this was a huge breakout game for him, getting that key start at second base, mind you, against a right-hander. So miss me with the platoon nonsense on, oh, we only got to play Acuna against lefties. Far from it, baby. He goes 2 for 3 with a double, a stolen bag, a walk, a run scored, and he also got on there that we saw via error with him putting the bunt down. So like Alonso, Acuna got on base pretty much every single time, with the exception of one at-bat, I believe, that we saw him going 2 for 3. Now at a 258 average and at just under 700 OPS on the year. I know these aren't the most tremendous numbers, but these are very much in line with what you would expect from Luisangel Acuna. This is in line with what we've gotten to a degree in the minor leagues. Acuna is not known for his power upside, but more so his gap-to-gap contact and certainly stolen base ability. And him right there, the highlight of him putting that bunt down for the error to happen from the starter there, trying to get the throw to first, is yet the latest prime example of how much of a lethal weapon Luis Angel Acuna is. Even if he is not giving you as much offensive upside that you're hoping, you know he's going to command things perfectly fine defensively at second base, looking brilliant there, and you know that he's such a weapon on the base pass that even if he just gets on base with a walk or an error, he's going to do damage. The same way that in this ball game in particular, he got on right away that we saw from the Mets in the third inning with his first at-bat with a walk, and it was driven in with 2 outs from the polar bear right there and Pete Alonso. So Luis Angel Acuna has not only been impressive, but I truly feel validated as a fan who, again, for the past week plus, if you guys have been following the content here on WardyNYM, then you know very well how much I've been advocating for Acuna to be the man getting the consistent reps between himself and Beatty. Not a slight at all personally against Beatty as someone who wants to see him thrive still, but the fact of the matter is that this is a results-oriented business, as David Stern says it himself, and he would love to see one of the two run away at second base. Well, folks, it appears that we're starting to get that now in Luis Angel Acuna. But here's where we have a greater discussion. Seeing Acuna's great play at second base, now that Jose Siri is out for at minimum probably the next 2 months or so with that fractured tibia, which is beyond frustrating. Thankfully, as Jose Siri spoke to the media last night and said it himself, he doesn't believe that it's going to require surgery. It's just going to be a long rehab process to getting healed and to get right, obviously. So Siri's disappointed. I'm disappointed too to see that speed demon off of this Mets roster. But if you're going to replace him, especially internally, that's where we need to talk about where Luis Angel Acuna comes into play. Because as many of you guys mentioned to me in my post-game show last night, you're saying, Wardy, why not Acuna at center field? And initially, I was reluctant to even kind of entertain that conversation because I didn't initially foresee the Mets considering that as an option. But after bearing more in mind how much reps Acuna had at center field last year in the minor leagues, which was a lot in Syracuse, and knowing that the Mets don't really have a lot of depth in the outfield right now. They're not going to rush Drew Gilbert, who's looking great in Port St. Lucie, coming back from his hamstring injury. He isn't anywhere close to touching the Major League roster right now. I'm sorry to break these to you Mets fans that would believe it to be otherwise. It isn't the case. Gilbert is not getting the call in the immediate future. Jeff McNeil will be back with the Mets as soon as this upcoming weekend or so, and that's exciting. And with Jeff returning, that would ultimately mean that a guy like Beatty will likely be sent down. But what do you do then with the outfield configuration? Because right now the expectation is that the Mets are in fact going to be calling up Jose Azocar as that true center field backup option for Tyrone Taylor. And in case you guys don't know Jose Azocar, Jose, who the Mets acquired 2 off seasons ago, had a brilliant spring for the Mets this past year and has MLB experience. You know, had 98 games in 2022 with the Padres with 10 RBIs, 5 stolen bags, and a 257, 298, 332 clip for 81 WRC+. In 2023, he had a smaller sample size with not as good numbers. In 2024, he had a 219 average with a 51 WRC+, which wasn't great, and just 61 games and 79 play appearances, 5 stolen bags, 13 runs scored in said games. But Azocar, like Acuna, is a speed demon, and he's a perfect backup option at center field for Tyrone Taylor, especially if the Mets are really going to prioritize defense here. Pretty much he's just like Jose Siri when it comes to his speed ability as defensive upside. Not as good as Jose and doesn't have as much power upside as Jose Siri. So just more of a lock as your prototypical contact type guy that'll get on base every now and then hopefully try to steal bags when he does. But bearing in mind that Jose Azocar will likely be the call-up, as we broke down in this past day's video in our previous Big Mets Updates segment, so I'm not surprised to see that once Siri officially becomes official, but then pair that with Jeff McNeil coming back from injury as a guy who can play second base and the corner outfield, and you're left wondering, what do the Mets do with Luis Angel Acuna? Because in my opinion, you cannot justify Acuna staying on this roster over Beatty just to have him be that guy to come in as a late-game replacement in the 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th innings, what have you there, as a defensive guy, whereas McNeil gets the bulk of the playing time. What you should do is the following. At minimum, platoon the 2 at second base based on certain matchups. So Acuna is still facing right-handers, but maybe just not as much because McNeil's also going to get some playing time at second base. Pair that with having games where McNeil gets reps in second base, potentially shifting Nimmo to center if the Mets feel comfortable enough. If they don't, I have no issues with them not going down that route because Nimmo's been a corner outfielder the past year plus, and I don't love the idea of him getting consistent center field reps whatsoever, but every once in a while, and I think the Mets could stomach that if they don't, say, have Nimmo get some days at DH where you want to take a day off of his legs, which I don't hate the idea of either, and then maximize your offensive output based on certain pitching matchups. But Acuna in center field does make a level of sense for a guy that, again, played there regularly this past year in Syracuse, played professionally in many ways, as a speed demon, and outside of his size, which is his biggest gripe and the most obvious one for a center fielder. I'm not in love of guys that are just a smidge taller than me personally, try to command center field because they don't have as much reach, range, and obviously when it comes to wall climbing, not as much in their favor. But I also know I'm being nitpicky when Acuna is still a speed demon and can cover all aspects of center field fairly comfortably. Now, as long as it doesn't hinder Acuna's offensive upside, I'm not at all opposed to seeing him get actual fairly good playing time in center field. And that's something that the Mets think makes most sense for them, where they give Acuna some looks in center field based on matchups. Then they have Jeff get some reps in left field. And for the days especially that they have Jeff in left field, then they will say have Acuna more at second base. And then when Acuna is, say, more in center field, you're going to have McNeil more at second base, and your corner outfield being Brandon Nimmo and Juan Soto, and then your DH rotation, that being of Mr. Jesse Winker and Starling Marte based on matchups. That is something that I can stomach as a fan, but I need to see the Mets go out and officially make it known themselves that they're now going to consider center field reps for Luis Angel Acuna, because they didn't do it at all that we saw in spring training. But something to make note of, and I want to shout out Anthony Como and his latest piece this past night for making note of this. Let's also bear in mind that he's also one of these guys in Acuna that we saw before games for Syracuse and Team Venezuela in the Winter League. He had himself regular plays in the outfield, taking, shag fly balls there to stay sharp. So he's still been getting those outfield reps not too long ago, and it'll be interesting to see if the Mets tap back into this because of their lack of center field depth now, especially without a guy in Alexander Canario, who the Mets unfortunately had to trade right before the season began to the Pittsburgh Pirates. I know Canario hasn't hit a lick on average, did have his first home run the other day, but it would have just been a nice cushion of upside on the outfield front internally that the Mets could have considered, and they were going to be able to sneak him there through the DFA period. They couldn't. That's why they had to trade him for cash to Pittsburgh, and the rest is history. But Mets fans, I want to hear from you. What do you think is going to be the best course of action for the Jose Siri replacement? Is it not only Jose Azocar getting the call, but give Acuna more reps now in center, and then when McNeil especially returns, have them kind of platoon things in the outfield and the infield based on matchups and what is best for them if they're facing a lefty or a righty? Or do you guys love the idea of Acuna getting more consistent reps at second base, giving McNeil more reps in the outfield, maybe shifting Nimmo a little bit more to center based on certain games and matchups, and having Azocar obviously as a center field option too, but not one that you want to have to tap into too much beyond a late game replacement? That is a guy that makes perfect sense to come in the 8th inning plus to come in and command center field for you, especially if, say, they already got to the bottom of the lineup and they're back to the top of it for the final at-bats that the Mets may have in the game. Let me know all your thoughts about that in the comments down below, everybody, and thank you kindly for doing exactly that. Now, folks, we got a lot more to get into, especially on the Ronny Mauricio front, but before we do that, let's give a big shout out to our awesome friends here on the platform. Folks, the Mets season has officially started, which means it's time to shout out our amazing sponsor here at SeatGeek, because not only are they going to have me covered, but they're going to have each and every one of you covered with all of your ticketing needs throughout the course of the 162. Because it's one thing to be the #1 rated ticketing app with over 28 million downloads and 70,000+ active events to choose from, whether it's Mets games, different team games, whether you're looking at concert tickets, comedy show tickets, anything ticket related, SeatGeek has you covered. And just to give you guys further proof, I have been utilizing SeatGeek well before we actually had them here as a ticketing sponsor. And the best part of it all, everybody, is that they have a grading scale, a true system in their app that's limited on the best in the game, in my humble opinion. As you guys see beside me, we're going to take a look at some future Mets games, specifically against the Philadelphia Phillies right around mid to late April. And as you guys see the ticket prices, you see a range of 1 to 10 on the scale, meaning how good it is for a bang for your buck, and a color coordination scale, meaning if it's it's green, that you should really definitely get those tickets because it's a great bang for your buck. And if it's red, if it's more in the rating of 1 to 5, they're probably overpriced, and you could probably do better elsewhere, still in the SeatGeek gap, but somewhere else when you're looking to acquire tickets in said app. So that's what I love so much about them. They make it so easy, so simplistic to give me a great idea as to what I should be pouncing on, especially when some awesome deals present themselves throughout the course of the 162 there in the SeatGeek app. So what does this mean, everybody? It means that if you haven't already, you got to check out our awesome friends, because they're going to have you covered, again, with Mets tickets or whatever you need ticket-wise throughout the entire course of the year, which is why I implore each and every one of you, if you haven't already, to check out our amazing promo code at WardyNYM by clicking the link down below the description of this video. Shout out to SeatGeek, as always, for being an amazing sponsor on the platform, everybody. But seriously, use WardyNYM as your promo code. Once you click it, it's hyperlinked too, so if you have the app downloaded, it's going to tell you automatically that that percentage was added, and you're going to get some money off your next ticketing purchase, all thanks to our awesome friends here at SeatGeek. Shout out to them once more. We appreciate them greatly. Alrighty, folks, shout out to SeatGeek once more. Now let's get into what is happening with Ronny Mauricio, and let's hear it from Mets skipper himself and Carlos Mendoza. Take a listen, everybody.
Mauricio.
He's scheduled a DH tomorrow, the complex in extended. So the fact that he's going to get now in game action, that's a good sign. Like I said, just getting at bats, he's going to be playing games, but he'll be in extended screen for now.
Any timeline on him playing the field?
We'll see. You know, hopefully we'll get him some reps defensively, start playing full games in extended, and then, you know, we'll move him.
So I want to give a big shout out actually to Hector Gomez, as he was the first to have this report initially early over this past day or so on the Ronny Mauricio front, and Hector reported the following. Ronny Mauricio will have his first rehab assignment there that we saw Tuesday in Port St. Lucie as DH after he underwent surgery to repair his torn ACL and his right knee back in January, and then he had that follow-up surgery that we saw, the arthroscopic procedure in August to remove scar tissue. So that right there is why Mauricio has had the setback. That is why Mauricio has been such a slow roll, where we didn't even see him obviously in spring training, nor did we see Drew Gilbert in spring training either, as he's coming back from his hamstring injury and looking great at Port St. Lucie. Both Gilbert, Mauricio, and it looks like potentially McNeil at least are going to be playing in Port St. Lucie, but I have a feeling that Jeff is also going to get moved up, because I know that Alvarez is. This was not something that I actually intended on discussing, not because I didn't want to talk about it, I just honestly forgot about it. But Francisco Alvarez, there is a key update on him as well, as his next game is going to be moved up there that we're seeing to AA. The only reason why he's not playing in AAA yet is just because of weather, but he is in fact being moved up, so his next game will be higher competition there as he continues to work his way up there in the Mets minor leagues, coming back from that hamate bone injury. But great news on Alvarez. McNeil is obviously going to continue to skyrocket through the minors up until he returns from his rehab stint, and we're going to talk about that all in a big Mets update segment 24 hours from now, after hopefully the Mets conclude their series victory against Minnesota Twins. I will have pregame and postgame coverage for later on today for you guys to check out at the time of recording this one, April 15th that is. But guys, let's talk more here on the Ronny Mauricio front, because do you guys remember Ronny? All I have ever asked by Mets fans since the start of spring training, since the start of the season, is constantly the following. What is going on with Ronny Mauricio? And now we finally have some clarity. This is a huge step in the right direction for Ronny, and let's not forget what Ronny brought. And I know it wasn't anything crazy, but let's go back to 2023, where Ronny blossomed in AAA. We saw him rip 23 home runs, 71 RBIs, 24 stolen bags for a 292 average, a 346 on base, and a 506 slug for a 108 WRC plus, so almost 10% better than the average batter in baseball there in Syracuse. He then gets the call to the Mets, obviously, in his age 22 season. He's already 24 now, so time is ticking for Ronny to get going here, and we know that 108 plate appearances, 2 home runs, 9 RBIs, 11 runs scored, 7 stolen bags in those 26 games. So Ronny's going to be an absolute demon once he's fully healthy and running on the base paths, because we know how much he brings with the raw tool ability. A 248 average, a 296 on base, and a 347 slug for a 79 WRC plus, so right around 20% below league average, as he was with the Mets when nothing was going right for them towards the end of the season there in 2023. And I will say this about Ronny Mauricio: I would say, to temper expectations. He's not a guy that's going to be rushed or skyrocketed through the farm. What's most important for him is for him to get healthy, get back to being able to handle infield reps, and then hopefully as the course of the year goes on for him in the minor leagues, he'll find himself not long before getting back to AAA Syracuse 1, but ultimately being a guy that the Mets may consider as we get into the second half of the season, if not towards the end, as an actual guy to rely on to a degree. And as we see, and I shouldn't say rely on, but a guy that they will at least ponder to call up. And as we see from his baseball savant numbers going back to 2023, he's well above league average in base running. Obviously, fielding and batting have more work to do. Average exit velocity, he's in the 80th plus percentile. Sweet spot, 80th plus percentile. Bat speed, closer to the 90th plus percentile. So quick bat, just like Brett Beatty, but it's all about these other things that you see, right? These K rates, these whiff rates, they will have to be worked on. That's where the rawness of Ronny Mauricio certainly comes into play. He is a very exciting raw player that we know, if we could see polished quite a bit, could, if not be a nice trade piece for the Mets and a big deal over the next year or so, that may certainly be a key part of the future for this team, where we don't really know how his future holds in the organization, or he profiles best in the infield, potentially outfield. But what we do know is that Ronny clearly has talent and is clearly a guy that should have Mets fans excited to see back in game action officially beginning today at the time of you guys watching this video right here. So let me know all your thoughts on the Ronny Mauricio front, because that wasn't the only update we had. We also have one. I apologize for the audio running for a second there. We also have one on Sean Manaea from Anthony Como. Manaea received an MRI over this past day, and it showed improvement, and he resumed playing catch off flat ground. He will not, however, progress beyond that over the next 10 days. The Mets want to make extra sure that he's fine before pushing him, and that's the right thing to do. We need to stop the notion of rushing these injuries with the obliques, especially because that's exactly how he had a setback, and now he's not returning until right around the same timeline as Frankie Montas, which is end of May, early June. And let's not forget just how talented Sean Manaea is, everybody. Mets pitching has carried them so far this year. Entering their first game against the Twins, they still had a team best ERA at 2.3. It's still team best across Major League Baseball after that outing. I just haven't seen the stats or re-uploaded since then because Fangraphs is a little delayed on it, unfortunately. But looking really good has been the pitching staff, and the idea, the thought of having both Frankie Montas and Sean Manaea added to this rotation by the time that we get towards the end of May, early June, I think is going to be huge, because at that point, I'm sure that the pitching will get exposed a bit on guys maybe not giving us enough length of the rotation, the bullpen coming back down to earth a little bit, because naturally that's just going to happen in 162 as great as they've been playing. So I'm really excited and intrigued to see what things are going to look like, the dynamic of this rotation, and who's boxed out once Manaea and Montas are back. Because the initial box out that you think of is guys like Griffin Canning and Tyler McGill. But if both play up and say one really looks better than the other, then the Mets are going to have a good problem on their hands to see what they'll do, should they obviously roll them with a six-man rotation and go on from there. But that's the latest on the pitching updates. So let me know, guys, on the Samoan Southpaw front, how excited are you to see Sean Manaea finally starting to get back in a groove and hopefully get healthy and back on the mound and back in this Mets rotation as soon as humanly possible, folks? Because now, speaking of pitching, let's wrap up the show to expand a little bit more here on this Mets bullpen, because currently, as you guys can see right here beside me, the Mets bullpen ranks pretty good right now. Per Fangraphs, and this was entering their first game against the Twins, so the stats aren't 100% accurate here. But that's a good thing, only because they're only better now, which is really exciting. But if we go up the list here, the Mets, let me scroll down here, just go to the side. The Mets currently ranked third entering that game against the Twins in bullpen ERA at 1.95. The Mets also rank far and away first in Major League Baseball that we see in total value per WAR. Mets are just ahead, actually, the Boston Red Sox at 1.2 to 1.1. And the reason why their bullpen has been as nails as it's been has been because of guys that you know that we've been gassing up on the platform since the start of spring. It's guys like Max Kranick going 10 shutty for us so far this year. It's Huascar Brosban basically doing the exact same thing, with the exception of one bad outing that he had where he couldn't piggyback Clay Holmes the way that he certainly did this time around after Clay went 5 strong innings of 1 earned run baseball. Huascar Brosban came in, shut the door there on 2 innings, which we absolutely love to see. And now when I look at this Mets bullpen between Reed Garrett, Huascar Brosban, AJ Minter, Max Kranick, Edwin Diaz, in which he has been far from consistent so far this year, and we know how good Edwin can and still will be. We know Jose Budo to a degree, to a very different degree in Danny Yuns, because you guys know how I feel about him. Don't love him. They have a plethora of options. Ryan Stanek, can't forget him, was absolutely nailed last night. Buddy's fastball touching 99 whenever we need him to. Danilo Nunez is chilling in the farm still. You got Rico Garcia, Tyler Zuber, Genesis Cabrera, Anthony Ghost, Jose Urena, just chilling, everybody. They're just chilling right now. The fact that the Mets have as much depth as they do in the farm with their bullpen, and it's performing as good as it is right now, should have you very excited, because heading into the season, and I just said this in my latest segment with the New York Post Sports YouTube channel, shout out to my guy Dexter Henry, check it out on their YouTube channel over the past day or so. I broke down after the conclusion of the series victory against the Athletics there, winning 2 games out of 3 for their 4th straight series victory. I went and broke down how, especially on the pitching front, heading into the season, the expectation was the offense would be great and the pitching would be not so much. It'd be underwhelming because of the lack of depth there. So far, it's the complete opposite, because that is how baseball works. It's a mysterious wonder. In the case of the Mets, they have things going in their favor, and that's where you have to give further credit to not only the players, but also the coaching staff and Jeremy Hefner. Desi Druskull, that can't be understated, coming over from the Yankees as the Mets' new assistant pitching coach this year. The guy's a stud. He's a brilliant mind, and he's pairing really well with Jeremy Hefner there and everyone else in company when evaluating the pitching lab and the pitching staff entirely. So Mets fans, let me know who has stood out the most for you on the bullpen front outside of some, like the obvious one, in my opinion, Max Kranick. Let me know in the comments down below who's been most impressive to you and why. And let me know all your key takeaways from everything that we broke down in our latest Big Mets Updates video right here, right now. Thank you guys again for watching. I will see you all for pregame coverage later on today. And we will also have postgame coverage directly after the conclusion of, again, hopefully the 5th straight series victory for our Amazons. Have a great one, folks. And as always, no matter what, let's go Mets, baby. Peace out.